Hi, I'm Paul Verschure, and together with my colleague Julia Lup, we're speaking today with Nandita Chaudhary, an expert on child development, family studies, and cultural psychology, with specific reference to Indian communities. A former professor at Lady Urban College at the University of Delhi, Nandita began her academic career as a Fulbright scholar and is currently a senior fellow of the Indian Council of Social Science Research.
Nandita, welcome to our podcast. Um, so, Nandita, um, could you maybe first give us a little bit of sketch of your professional trajectory that brought you to where you are today, with also your specific view on collaboration?
I graduated from University of Delhi in what seems like another time ago in 1978, and did a little bit of field work with rural families after that. And after that, I joined my alma mater for teaching and have worked there for 37 years. In between, I went for my PhD on a Fulbright scholarship to the US at Clark University, which, Fulbright is, I'm sure you're all familiar with it. Julia, you would be familiar with it. Fulbright is a wonderful opportunity for people from other countries to get together. But, the excitement of joining the Fulbright program came with a lot of undisclosed power dynamics. We went for our what is called a pre-Fulbright training at Wharton in Pennsylvania, and that was when I began to see the side of academic collaborations, which till then I was just this wide-eyed young scholar, and I thought everybody would just welcome us with open arms, and we could say what we liked and give our reviews as. So I became aware of very quickly. So we've grown up in large families, and very used to watching for cues from other people. Either way, so if somebody welcomes you, you're quick to pick it up. And if somebody tries to sort of ignore you, even ignoring is a social cue, right? So if somebody so with that kind of social training as a child and as an adolescent, I was far, perhaps maybe too sensitive to some of these cues. It could have been nicer. I wouldn't have noticed many things. So when in that training, orientation training, I realized that actually we were informed that when Fulbright scholars travel from the US to other countries, they go as experts. And when Fulbright scholars come into the US, they come to learn. So, there is a very fundamental imbalance in the way that the Fulbright scholarship works. And yet in your you still have the same label. So there's no difference in the label. So you don't realize until you are in it that, it's something. Anyway, the Fulbright experience was wonderful. I learned so much, and I was pretty good at computers. I really enjoyed debates in the old format, and I picked up stuff in Clark University then. It was wonderful. I decided to make the best of it. I had 2 young children, and decided that I couldn't leave them behind for 9 months. So on a shoestring budget, we invested all our savings in traveling, and my husband did join us, and waited at tables to earn some extra money and stuff, the usual thing. Wonderful times as we remember them, but when you're going through it, it was hard. So that was my first experience of collaboration, and from which I learned a lot, both academically as well as socially, as well as internationally. So I was determined that I wanted to come back because, first of all, it's an exchange visa. So if you in my family, we have four siblings. Two of my siblings are very successfully integrated into the American community. One was an IIT engineer, he still is, and a technocrat. And my sister was a pediatrician. So, we were all very successful academically. So when I had traveled to the US before that, we had seen a very different America. And when I went as a scholar, I don't know if you know Worcester, which is close to Boston, where Clark University is. It was literally in a dump, and I saw the side of America that I hadn't seen. So again, in terms of experiences, that side of it was known as a sort of area where Vietnamese immigrants choose to live. Many of them who didn't even speak English. So I was actually in that school, I was perhaps the most qualified. So they put me on the board of the school, which was good fun. So that was my initiation into the taste of international politics, the beauty of it, the wonder of collaboration, as well as the power struggle of wanting to speak. I had a good mentor, and she kind of told me that she didn't really understand my work. So it was halfway through my PhD that I went, because she doesn't know the language. But she was very happy to let me express myself, learn whatever I wanted. And I remember I used to write my essays for class. She used to call them squibs. And everyone else would type them. And we didn't have a computer until halfway through. And I remember her saying that I miss your handwriting because your essays always had something different to offer. So little things like this, where your disadvantage seemed to be like an advantage, but wasn't really an advantage. So I returned to India to my job. I was on leave again in the university, and very happy to come back. The label of the Fulbright did a lot for my future. So, you became like someone who has returned from a US university. And, I got the taste of what it is to publish more and to speak in ways where you could present your work to someone who doesn't know the background. So little things I would say about, let's say, multiple mothering, people would be astonished. I mean, students in class, scholars at conferences when you went. So that taste of that, people enjoying what you say, even though they don't know the context, how much to explain, how much, and the balance between not wanting to romanticize India, because I think all cultures have their problems as well as their beauty. So I always wanted to make sure that I didn't want to land up. And that was actually my kids and my husband were always, look, don't make it sound like it's the best place on earth, because it isn't. So that balancing and grounding has always come from my family, actually.
But which department did you return to when you went back to your university?
So I was in the Department of Human Development and Childhood Studies in the university. It comes under the umbrella of home economics. But when for my Fulbright, I went to the Department of Psychology.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So it could be called the discipline of child psychology is where I work. Child psychology and family studies.
Right. But then from there, and from your role as an academic in India, you also became active in many different organizations and bodies, right? So you didn't stay inside academia.
No. No, because when I returned, I wanted the institution in which I work has a very high commitment to community development. So it was always told to us that, in a poor country, you cannot afford just to write academic papers. You need to be involved with society, with decision making, with administration. So don't just do that part of it. Do your work for development. Share your knowledge with others. So that, parent meetings, teacher training programs, high court, child custody issues. So these were the other things in which I became involved, along with which the label and the successful completion of a Fulbright gave me the entry into international conferences, how you write papers, how you present yourself, how you prepare presentations. So I was able to keep these different sides of the only thing I never really enjoyed was administration.
Mhm.
So I'll be honest, when I had to do it, it was a headache, and I had to do it twice over. So it's the 6 years of headship of my department, and I wasn't happy doing that. It took away time from doing the things I love.
And Nandita, currently, what are your main activities? So in that trajectory, where do you spend most of your time on?
Okay, so I chose to quit my work in 2016. I would have been on the faculty till to 2022, but for personal reasons, my husband was posted in Bombay, and I had enough. My kids had left, and they were studying, and they'd got married and left the country. And I decided I just didn't want to stay alone, and I wanted to do. I just quit. Actually, I in retrospect, I can attribute reasons, but that time people said, "Why don't you take leave?" I said, "No, I want a clean break from academics, from teaching, not from academics."
Mm-hmm.
But now, Nandita, if we focus a minute on the work that you have done over the years in terms of looking at patterns of childcare in families, perhaps now that you have a little bit of distance, you can also look at it reflecting back in a slightly different manner. And I think it would be interesting to spend a moment thinking about these patterns of childcare, because in a way, a family is nothing but a big collaborative effort to raise children. And could you perhaps, do you see different patterns in different areas, rural versus urban? Let's focus on India first.
Mm-hmm. So a lot of so I could never quit thinking about the family and about childhood, right? So my mind is always alert to what's going on the street, in the neighborhood. If I'm traveling in a train or a bus or a plane, so if I see a father holding a baby. So I do a lot of posts on Facebook, and then I started my blog, which was really to express myself, which really filled in the space that teaching had left. It was like an extended classroom for me. So I began to sort of consolidate some of the work that I was doing, and writing for the lay public was something that, although mostly I think it was just the students who were loyal to me who were reading my blog, honestly. But I imagined a larger audience. And it also, very strangely, these ideas would come to me. A single encounter could initiate a whole article. So as I said, there's you see physical punishment, as you may know, is a very difficult issue. Or you hear a father saying something, or you hear a grandparent doing something. It lets off. Like for instance, there was just this idea when I went to Denmark for a conference. We saw this pacifier trees. So in Denmark, I don't know if you know, they hang they call it dummies, or they hang them on trees so that the child has a sort of, here you give up your pacifiers now. So there are like Christmas decorations. I was stunned by that. And then the question came up in my head. I don't see pacifiers in India. What is behind it? So I came back and I initiated a conversation. Now, none of this is part of any formal research study, but I had students who were, I would just write to them and say, look, can you ask 10 people about this, or do it as a class assignment? And we came up with, sort of anecdotal responses to why pacifiers are just not something that are used in India. And at the end of the day, you may give 1,000 philosophical explanations, but it's a tropical country and you can get infected,
Right. So Nandita, then to a very, very straightforward question. How do you define collaboration? What is collaboration and what is it good for?
In order, I think that for academics, isolated, let me put it the other way. Academic ventures without collaboration are meaningless for me. Because unless you bounce your ideas, unless they are mirrored off someone else, like for instance, had I not traveled, had I not seen those pacifier trees, I would not have looked back at our families and realized, hey, this is missing. Why is it missing? When you talk about sleeping, who sleeps by whom? I remember so clearly that, students still very warmly used to talk about sleeping with their mothers when their dads were away. So when you see difference, that you can look back at yourself. So I think that collaboration is necessary not only to understand the other, but also to understand the self.
But now, if we look at the family dynamics as you described it just earlier, what makes that collaborative? And what features make interactions in a family collaborative?
Within a family,
or between, but let's start within the family. Yes,
commonality of purpose, ideology, consideration for each other, love, affection, I would say, so that can carry on. I have done some collaborations with people I didn't like. They were never successful. So for me, that underlying thread of affection is very important. Even within the family, if I lose respect for someone, so respect for the other person and his or her scholarship, I have to look up to something in the other person in order to collaborate, even if it's somebody much younger than I.
Sure, but can you unpack affection and love? What does that mean in that context exactly?
You like conversations with the person. So the person listens to you, you listen to that person. I would say the person makes you want to smile. I mean, it's if you are struggling to present yourself, and also the person accepts you for who you are, not what they want me to be. So, for example, I collaborated with a project which was like 36 countries. Okay. I was just like this passive bit of India that they wanted data from, and that's it. After that, we had nothing to say, nothing to do. So unless I could speak up, I never went back to that group because I realized that I had been sucked upon, something had been sucked out of me, taken away and used in, my name is there on the publications. I don't, it's meaningless for me, honestly.
But would you still consider that a collaboration? Or would that be something else? Is it more coercion?
No.
Abuse or
it's not a collaboration. It's perhaps that I think it's unethical. I mean, that kind of collaboration is not acceptable to me. So at the slightest hint of it, I became better at realizing who to avoid as I went on in my and somehow I have never been attracted by large funds. Money has never been something that I have run after. So, it leaves you so free to say, no, I'm not interested.
So commonality of purpose is not enough in this case, in academic collaboration. What about, say, a collaborative view of the family, where commonality of purpose obviously is to raise children? What other elements are important in the family unit to ensure successful child rearing?
I think I will admit, even though I'm not good at administration myself, I will admit that you need well-defined roles and and acceptance. And I have been very fortunate in the fact that not only do my husband and I share an affection, and whenever I've seen that in families, I can pick it up immediately, but he has great regard for me as a mother. So in front of the children. So I see that as a very important element of collaboration and commonality of purpose. I mean, there are families in which it doesn't happen, where there are different individuals who are living together. I don't see that as a collaborative relationship. So, this triangulation. So for the researchers, now, if we are talking about the researchers who are actually going out into the field, you can collaborate with them or you can give them instructions. I don't see just giving instructions as collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
Unless they are at the desk and there is a mutuality of discussion and they have the authority to speak up and say, no, this is wrong. You're interpreting this. I was there. I know what it's like. So I see democratic structures as a very, I don't mean democratic in the sense that my kids could do what they like. No, we were paying the bills, so we could decide, look, you can't buy this. So, however, for speaking up about in a research collaboration or in a family collaboration, especially once the kids are old enough or the researcher is an expert enough, I'm using the same metaphor here, participation in the process and the outcome and looking back at it. I mean, how many times with the kids I've sat down and, how am I as a mother? I mean, so we sort of sit and evaluate it. And I know it wasn't always fun for them because they say, can you please stop? You're fine. We'll be okay. But this making the other person feel significant for what you're collaborating towards. So it's
Nandita, you're also working with the Delhi High Court Mediation Center for Child Custody Cases, right? As an expert. And in some sense, those are the examples where this kind of family collaboration is breaking down. So what makes the difference in those cases? Is there a pattern to that where you say, well, across the board, across all these cases I looked at, it always breaks down along predictable patterns? Is there such a pattern to that?
One of the things that I've noticed is that there is something like unhealthy love for your child or for your idea or your project. If you love, I mean, at least in the high court cases, I always said that it was not that the child is not loved, but you love the child so much that you want to own it. And if you're not getting along with someone, you're not able to get along with that other person so most cases of child custody, where mostly women, would completely undermine the role of the father to the child as well as to the court in order to claim ownership of the child. So running down the father was a very important, or father or his family. And I have seen grandparents. So in India, we have kin terminology that distinguishes between the maternal and the paternal grandparents. So it's very easy. In one word, you can make out which side of the family you're talking about. I've seen it even more seriously in grandparents. So they become so overpowering. The love for the daughter and for the grandchild is so much that this other person is seen as outside. And trying to even tell them that, look, the child has a right to the father. The father has a right to the child.
But Nandita, is that always love with a big L? Or is it also instrumentalization of that child because that child is also contributing to your own future?
I'm using the terminology of the client. They say it is their love for the child. I can see it differently, but who am I to put words into their mouth and to evaluate what their love is? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, I don't know the full story. I can never know the full story as the other. It is only what is presented. Some of it will be exaggerated. Some of it will be silenced. So I don't know, when I'm not inside the high court, I would always be overcome with worry about, will I be able to see and do justice for the child?
But the high court is relying on you as an expert. So in some sense, the high court wants you to translate that word love to them.
So let me finish. However, when I was in the room, I never had any, I didn't have doubts. Somehow I could see, and I would just write out if I did have, so I was never asked to appear. I would be asked to give a written report. So if there were areas, I would write out exactly what I thought was happening there, right? And what the recommendation would be. So I would always insist that, I don't know. I mean, we have so much, media coverage of women's issues. In my experience, I have found that in cases of family dynamics, it is really the father who suffers far more. In my experience, maybe I'm wrong, but the claim that the mother has and the ease with which fathers are dismissed, I cannot speak of other countries. I don't know the legal dynamics there, but I see that as a very critical loss for the children who are growing up in.
But how do you explain that? Is that a bias in the system, or?
I think we over dramatize motherhood. Yes, I would say that there is a lot of romanticism about being mother, and with Bollywood, and you have things of, okay, if you've had your mother's milk, then you are, it binds you forever, and all that kind of. I don't really buy into that. I can see how much of that is just hyperbole, but I don't see that much in terms of fatherhood.
Mhm.
It hasn't kept pace with. So, and we have very serious feminist movements, which all they do, I mean, they do protect women against abuse. And I'm not saying that that's not an important issue, but to ensure that we don't lose sight of the place of every member in the family, including grandparents. I mean, in Indian families, grandparents play a key role. So the politics of the family is something that is very hard to describe, but often easy to sense.
Mhm.
Um,
But now, do you apply certain models to that? Do you have, let's say, an X number of models of family dynamic, and is it, oh, this is model 1 and this is model 2? No.
I don't. No, I do it just really from the seat of my chair, because I'm not trained as a counselor. And they kept calling me back. I kept saying, look, I'm not trained in counseling. But one thing did happen, which is the reason why I eased off, is that I didn't know how to stand back and just return to my life. So I would ruminate over these cases, and I would talk to my children, and I would come home and I'd talk to my husband, and like, how can people do this? So that was taking a toll on me. So when I quit work and I moved to Bombay, I was quite relieved. And I haven't actually told them that I've come back to Delhi. So you can see that somewhere it was taking too much of it would just break my heart to, and I didn't know, I wasn't trained to protect myself from that.
In these cases, Nandita, is there a pattern in terms of the base family dynamics? For example, I recall some of the descriptions you made earlier in the context of the attachment and bonding forum about families where the father took a primary role in caregiving because the women were going to the market, working outside. And so I'm asking, do you see patterns of behavior where there's this major breakdown? You speak of where the fathers suffer. Is it in families where the fathers are playing a primary care role or a secondary?
No, the secondary. It is one thing I noticed very clearly. When the maternal grandparents are too close to the mother and participate in every single decision that she takes, that is a situation that I have seen very often, and that isolates the father. So in fact, my problem, although it's a patriarchal unit, and Indian families, by and large, not all are patriarchal. By and large, you live with and closer to your paternal grandparents. I see the mother and mother's mother. When this bond is too strong, at least 4 or 5 of the cases were such that my precious girl, how could this happen to her? In fact, I'm realizing this as I'm speaking with you. I see that as and not so much. Of course, this also would play out far more in relationships where the couple were not terribly close to each other or didn't get along. So it exacerbated that. But the mother's too close to her mother, hasn't been able to disengage.
Nandita, doesn't it also play a role that the parents of the wife, of the mother, in some sense also often have committed a dowry into the wedding? Does that not strengthen or amplify their concerns? Like, oh, we have actually put our life savings into this, and now we stand to lose it all.
That's information I would not have access to.
No, but if you speculate.
I have not heard anyone say that. It's mostly that the people who come into the High Court for mediation were mostly middle and upper middle class. Not all were highly educated. So in which the case of dowry did come up when one couple was trying to divide property. But not as I invested in my daughter. The dowry, maybe it's there at the back of the mind, but it never surfaced in my experience at all.
But now also, so you mentioned this power imbalance. Do you see that as a major underlying factor? That, for instance, the wife mother with her parents have developed so much of a dominance in the discussion, in the discourse, that the man husband, without, let's say, family support, is sort of a minority and cannot push back against that. So are these power relationships important here?
Absolutely. I would say that they're critical here. And in the case of one grandparent of the paternal grandparent also, it's crazy, but in all of these cases, there has been the role of the grandparents has been critical. But then, knowing the Indian family, that's not coming as a surprise. So I don't know how often it is that it's just two people who are falling out of love with each other. I don't remember a single case like that.
Right. But that raises then the next question, right? What defines the force behind the power? Is it also the husband having fear of losing face? Is it fear of being, let's say, confronted with emotion, or to lose love of the wife and her family, or lose the children? So what are the underlying forces in
mostly the loss of face? And I would say the loss of face for the daughter and the daughter's family would, in the traditional system, be far more serious than for the man. This is something you hear all the time in India, that it's much easier for men. I don't know about the West. I don't know about, Germany, for instance. But here we keep saying that it's very easy for a man to get remarried and much harder for a woman to get remarried, especially if there are children. I think the loss of face issue is there for all. It's not, but something has changed in the last 10 years. It's far more common in the families, at least now that I'm not practicing for the last so many years, among our acquaintances, to break off. Now people say, now we're not going to stay together like our parents. It's not something that I'm going to tolerate. So a lot of women are standing up and saying and walking out. And some people in the older generation, you hear them saying that women are becoming too intolerant. Families are breaking. So the change is very significant in all social classes, I would say. the person who works in my house, her daughter has married. This is her. She was engaged. It broke off. She got married. She broke it off because she didn't like the guy. She's now married to a third person, has a child, but doesn't like to live in the village. And she's living with next door to her mother and raising her child. So it's becoming far more acceptable in cities and towns to break off.
Right.
Villages, I would say it's still harder. So,
Okay. But there's a paradox in that, right? Because earlier you said that often it's the man who has the short end of the stick in your experience. While on the other hand, it also is the case that the man apparently has much more opportunity to just leave and break off the whole marriage and go. Because
well, I don't. That's what people say. I'm not sure. In my experience, I think men have the short end of the stick. Like even with my helper's daughter, who's now gone through her second marriage, I feel bad for the guy because she just told him, I don't like living in the village. And, either you come and live here or we are done. So it's so patriarchy perhaps is is based on the fragility of men. I don't know. I mean, I'm just speculating there.
But now that so the different ramifications of this, right? So on the one hand, now we looked at family structure, also in your experience, especially in the Indian context. And this raises, of course, the question whether the family is sort of the proto-collaborative unit, right? So you could also say from an evolutionary perspective, that's how collaboration emerged. It started with family units or larger family units. And from there, it developed and became more structured. Is that how you would see it? Do you really see the family unit as the proto-form of collaboration?
Even autobiographically, I would say that, my family, I learned so much. And I was so sensitive to what I didn't learn from my family as well. So it's not just what you learn, but what you realize, oh my God, I never knew this, or my mother never pointed this out to me. So in my judgment, family screws you for life. Sorry for what, all of us have been impacted by the families in which we've grown up. You can either be very sensitive to the issue or you react to it, but you can never be indifferent to what you experience. So, for instance, if there is an alcoholic father, let's just take a severe example. You would either become like that yourself, and I'm not saying family is destiny. It's not that you cannot get out of it, but or you will become so sensitive. You will never remain indifferent to the serious aspects of what you have experienced.
Right.
I don't really know if this is what you wanted to talk about. I'm just...
No, but the other aspect is, and that's also what Julia mentioned at the beginning, one of the issues that you also, in some sense, insist on is cultural difference. To say, look, there's no universality here. And that's also your example of your Fulbright experience, the asymmetry in the perception of that, right? So now we could look again at this family model of collaboration. And then what are the cultural differences that you see there, if any?
Well, I think that, the power that the older generation exerts on the younger places certain limits that I see being crossed in other cultures, where obligatory actions are not seen as something, oh, I'm not going to just appear for this ceremony because the family is getting together because I'm obliged to you. Whereas here, a lot of time is spent in that, a peace. I don't know if it's appeasement would be too much, but you also get back in these asymmetrical relationships. And believe me, by asymmetrical, I don't mean undemocratic. It may be, paradoxical, what I'm trying to say, because I think asymmetry is a key fact of human relationships, but that doesn't imply absolute power over others, because
Sure.
that would be unacceptable. It would be an unhealthy relationship to
Right.
live in. But as often as that, I have seen enmeshed relationships in the name of what love be as hurtful towards others, because when you have that much affection for one person, it's always at the expense of others. So if you have two children, I mean, and you have to have a certain sense of, equity between the two relationships. So it's, in spite of the hierarchical structures, there has to be a sense of justice in order for there to be genuine and happy collaboration, whether it's families or professionals.
Now, an important aspect in collaboration is also a notion of trust, right? So is trust in some sense encapsulated in this sense of love that you spoke about earlier? Is that also trust, or is that something else?
I remember I'll give you an example of a collaboration that I did where I came to realize how critical trust was for me. Perhaps because I have had a very trusting, very trusting parents and grandparents, with many other faults, but they trusted us, and we trusted that our love for them and the fact that they would provide for us. There was a collaboration that we did in which, for the first time, rather than doing observations of children in the home, the person decided that he wanted to do a lab study. Okay. So please set up a lab because we want a structured setting. So we set up a lab. We tried getting parents to come, and these are parents of 12 to 18-month-old children. So we had relatives have come, or somebody would fall sick, you didn't get transport. Then we said, okay. So at every point, we tried to communicate with the person who had given the grant and who was the project director to say, look, okay, let's try making satellite labs. So let's find an institution closer to the residential areas, get a group of kids together and let them come, right? It was so hard to find safe places that would fulfill the requirement and pay rent for these. In the end, we were able to get only 1/4 of the target sample, whereas we had never had a problem in home-based studies because parents are very welcoming. Oh, you've landed up? Okay, let's accommodate you. But to take the initiative to come out to a lab, even though, he was a German professor. So he said, but they gave you an appointment. I said, look, they may have, but they haven't landed up. It was so hard for me to communicate. So at that point, that person wrote an email to me saying that your research staff, that, something about, I trusted you with this, and I just lost it. That is one direct, email exchange that I have had with this person. And of course, we had a long-standing collaboration, and we have a mutual friend whom I hold in very high regard. And I tried, but after that, I just decided, I said, when that you haven't understood the setting in which we work. And it's not that he wasn't familiar with he's traveled to India, he's lived with us and, lived in my home. I've never had problems with extending hospitality because I know how hard it is to do field work in India. And at the end of the day, to say that you didn't finish what was your commitment and I trusted you to do that, that was for me, a closed issue. I just would not want to collaborate with something like this because I don't know why, but I expect people to trust me 100%. And I do the same with someone else. When often in personal relationships, if I'm disappointed, then I'm really badly disappointed. So you're absolutely right. Being trusted is, it's not, being trusted for me is perhaps even more important than trusting. Because, Indians are known as shifty-eyed or whatever. I mean, that they're poor, so they will, misappropriate funds or something. I'm very sensitive to those, even if they are hinted at.
But now, in the context of the family dynamic that you also studied, there are different trust-based relations, right? Also, the children trust their parents, they trust their family almost as a given, right? So what's the dynamics of trust there? How does it get built up and how does it get destroyed?
Tough. How it would get destroyed is very hard for me to say. How it is built up is that it's tied so closely to the issue of affection and love that I was talking about. Because I can imagine, I cannot imagine love without trust and trust without love.
But this is really interesting, right? Because if we now start to generalize, we say, okay, let's now look at collaboration, the big picture type collaboration, like your project with 30 partners. And there, standardly, you would say, well, you need shared goals and you need trust. But now, does it actually imply that what we're really talking about is also love for that conglomerate, love for those goals? Would you find that a plausible generalization, or is that notion of trust actually something else than the trust inside the family?
I would say that the minute it becomes, when an idea becomes an industry, when it becomes, I do believe that a small group is far more, it's far more possible to be trustworthy and to be trusting in a smaller group. When there are these 30 countries and 30 or let's say 60 different collaborations with satellite members, I have experienced that there is a lack of trust. Okay, so how did you get this? Or what did you mean by this? Why is this missing? The way in which the questions go, and perhaps because the template of the family is so strong in my heart that I tend to want to work with people whom I like to spend time with. And that's just not possible in a large group. So perhaps that's why I quit work at a certain point and, reduce the...
But now, if we could engineer it, right? If we could engineer trust also in those environments, how would you change the process or change the participants? So imagine you would have a magic power to change the participants and the process. What would you change to see?
I would look for someone who was a mentor-like person at every nodal point. That there needs to be someone who would be someone who is easy to trust, easy to like, a likable person. I mean, all the things that we perhaps don't look for when we are hiring people. You're looking for communication skills. And I remember a story from when my children were young. And it was the first time my kids were going to daycare. The daycare was at the ground floor of the college, the department. And we had an elderly maternal sort of person who was the creche in charge. And she had helpers to do a lot of the physical work. And at some point, somebody complained that she is not stimulating the children enough. So our director of the institution just sat us down. And I was younger at that time, and we had this whole idea that kids should be kept actively engaged and they should have lots of activities and stuff. She said, simple thing. Do the children go to her or not? Tell me that. And my son, when he moved from the creche to the daycare, to the nursery school, he didn't cry for me. He cried for Buddy Mama. So she just looked at whether the children want to go to her. So I see that, when you are able to invite and welcome people to you, that's the kind of quality in a leader that I would say you need. Good, considerate, empathic leaders at every point in order for collaborations to thrive.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
If it's just contractual, sorry for the interruption, if it's just contractual, maybe it'll work. But you see what happens in Amazon. I mean, the bigger it gets, the messier it gets, the more exploitative it gets.
Mm-hmm. But now,
sorry, please.
No, go ahead.
No. I it's just Amazon and Google that get.
Okay. So what I'm wondering about is that if you look at India, you look at the world, we have massive challenges in front of us. To deal with these challenges effectively, collaboration is an essential requirement. It's not optional. We have to, at a massive scale. Do you believe, also in your experience, that humans are even capable of approximating that for 10% or 20%? Do you think we're capable as humans to achieve that level of collaboration?
Of course.
Okay.
In that sense, I'm a diehard optimist.
Okay.
I mean, yes, we're capable of that. Mm-hmm. And I think look at what we've done with the vaccine.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, fine, China is not giving us data and we cannot trust the information that comes out of China. Forget it. It's over. That part is done. Look at the collaborations that have happened. So in order to stay afloat, I find things to be joyful about every single day, even if it's the smallest of things. And when that happens, I share that with everyone in my circle, and I don't just mean my kids. So that sense of joy, I see that also as collaboration. I see my posts on Facebook as collaboration, even though I don't even know if anybody is receiving it. So the idea is to keep the joy and the affection towards others. And I do believe that humanity is very, very capable of realizing a better world. We are a better world than we were so many years.
Great. So Nandita Chaudhary. So Nandita Chaudhary.
Politics, yeah.
Yes.
Notwithstanding.
Thank you very much for this conversation.
Hi, you listened to one of our podcasts in the series on collaboration, produced by the Instrument Forum and the Convergent Science Network. You can find more episodes on our website.